Happy to welcome you to our final talk in the Deans Colloquium Series. 4 talks over 3 weeks. I think we've done really quite well. The speaker today is our own Kathy Burnett. Dr. Burnett, it really needs no introduction, but she's going to get one anyway. Because she really has accomplished some pretty impressive things. As you all know, she's currently the interim director and professor here at SLIS, Florida's iSchool. She began her academic career at Rutgers University, moving to Florida State University in 1996, where she served as associate dean from 1997 to 2004. From 2000 to 2004, she represented the then School of Information Studies at the meetings of the IT deans, now they're called the CRA deans, which was an early interdisciplinary precursor to the iSchool caucus. She was also a founding member of the National Center for Women and Information's Academic Alliance. Prior to receiving her PhD in 1989, she worked in special, academic, and public libraries in cataloging, public services, management, and children's services. Dr. Burnett's teaching experience includes information science, international and comparative information services, information education, social informatics, information behavior, information organization, and information architecture. She has served as major professor to numerous doctoral and master's students and twice has been nominated for the FSU Graduate Mentor Award. Dr. Burnett conducts research on the social meaning of information, including the development and application of theoretical frameworks to empirical studies of information worlds. Recent research has focused on interaction in online education, anticipatory socialization in doctoral education, and the emergence of disciplinary identity in information science. Currently, she is conducting studies of Latinas' engagement with IT and scientists' collaborative practices. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Burnett.
Thanks, Don. I feel like I want to go over there and sit down because that's where I belong. I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about identity and validity. Validity, oh good. Vitality in the 21st century iField, igniting Florida's iSchool. Oh good, it's not going to work. Excuse me. All right, so I'm going to be running back and forth. I'm going to be running back and forth because I need to change my slides. I want to interweave 3 themes in my talk today. The first is related to experience, and I mean my experience and also our collective experience. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the past and the present, and then I'm going to talk about leadership philosophy, so I'll be using some key concepts of consistent, collaborative, and connected. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about our future. And so I'll be talking about inviting you all to imagine, to invest, and to ignite. Here we are. This is Florida's iSchool. We have, since before I arrived, had a vision statement. And I know Paul doesn't like the colon in it. But I think the key concepts in that statement are very sound, and that's why it has persisted for so long. It's people and information making vital connections. And I'd like to say to you today that we're not really about people, and when we're not really about information, we're really about those vital connections. So helping people to make connections to information and helping people to make connections to one another through information. In case you were worried that you were unfamiliar or that I might have some hidden parts, here's my my bare bottom. And along the same lines as what I just said, for me, who I am is about the connections that I make. So that sassy little girl there is me. But you'll also see my brothers up here and my family's here. And I think that's important. I am who I am in part because after my first child was born, I found myself in a situation where we were trying to put together a cooperative preschool. And I found myself in the situation where they needed a leader. And it was one of those coincidences because I didn't have any interest, in fact, in leadership. I avoided taking the management class in library school until the very last class and had the really interesting opportunity to take that class with Regina Manudri. I don't know how many of you know Regina, but she was at the time the director of the Berkeley Public Library and was later the president of ALA. And she had an interesting philosophy that she invented on the spur of the moment because we were in school right after Proposition 13 passed in California, and all the funding for libraries was, it predicted to dry up totally. So she looked at us all and she said, "You're not going to be managing for a while, so I'm going to teach you how to be managed." And proactively. And I think that those two early experiences in my life led me down a path that I didn't expect to go. Frankly, I'm an introvert, and I would almost, without a doubt, prefer to be sitting in a carrel and working on something really interesting. At least I would have in the early part of my life. At this point, I think I'm much more extroverted than I was before, and I enjoy working collaboratively with other people. So let me talk a little bit about my leadership philosophy, which I hope I've demonstrated to some degree in the last 6 months. I think there are 3 key components of any leadership philosophy, and they're about whether or not you're consistent, what kinds of processes you engage in, and then what you do at the end. So consistent, collaborative, and connected. In terms of consistency, I believe in my very gut that at the heart of everything we do is governance, that you have to have a good infrastructure in place, and that infrastructure and that governance has to be engaged in an ongoing cyclical process of review. Governance, in an academic institution, the ideal is shared governance. It's slow. It takes a lot of care and tending, but in the long run, when you get to the goals, you've gotten to the goals that you've all agreed upon. And you have a sense of trust and commitment about what you're doing and engagement in what you're doing. And so that's really, in the last 6 months, what I've tried to help us move toward is some form of shared governance where we all feel that we're a part of what we do and that what we do counts. Infrastructure. I remember telling Larry, yeah, I guess I'm a structuralist. In terms of my early life, when I was a German literature major, I was more interested in deconstruction than construction. But I think that infrastructure is key to everything we do. And in infrastructure, we can talk about it in terms of physical infrastructure, like the technology that makes us be able to make connections. But we can also talk about it in terms of the human resources that provide the infrastructure and the relationships between individuals that give us an infrastructure to be able to move forward and make change. And we can also talk about infrastructure in terms of the policies and procedures that guide our work. And I think that in the last 6 months, we've made some real inroads. It may have driven you all crazy when we made you look at multiple drafts of an incomplete policy, et cetera. But I think that's important. You have to have those things in place. If you don't have those things in place, you're just always going to be doing just in time and spinning your wheels. And so we're trying to put that in place. And I think, the hard part in developing infrastructure, one of the hard parts is there's always something new that you feel like you have to address right now, and so it's hard to find the time to pay the attention that you need to. But hopefully, those just-in-time moments will creep up less and less as we do that. Okay, collaborative. I've had a really interesting career in which I was talking about with the welcoming committee today. I came to FSU largely following a leader that I wanted to work with, and that was Jane Robbins. And I think Jane did an excellent job with me in terms of understanding who I was and what my potential might be, and mentoring me effectively to take leadership and also to continue an academic career. And so that, you know, for 7 years, I functioned as the associate dean for the School of Information. And during that, towards the very beginning of that 7 years, we tried an experiment. We tried to implement team management. I'm not sure it really worked in the long run, but it was an experiment worth trying. And I think it has led us as a unit to be a very collaborative faculty, staff, and to really want to reach out to our larger stakeholder community. So I think collaborative is key for us. And I think that I also had the interesting opportunity a few years ago because of an NSF grant to work with a group of 6 faculty, and I don't even remember how many students anymore because they came in and out, but at the Mag Lab, which was kind of a different environment, and we went over there to study their collaboration, and realized that as we were doing this project that we were kind of learning about them while we learned about ourselves at the same time. So we built a collaborative process that I think will last, and I think that's really important. In order to be collaborative, you have to have some direction. And I don't mean direction from above by an individual. I mean you have to have a common goal, right? And I don't think it has to be a single goal, but you have to have a path that you want to walk. And I think we still have some work to do in terms of building a path that we want to walk, but I was just thrilled when, Table 2 came up with the collaboratory. I thought, okay, that's validation of an idea, and that's a direction that we could go. All right. So process is really, really important. And in my view, the process for this school is at its heart collaborative. And direction is equally important. And as I said, we have some work to do there. But we also have a history of doing things, of innovating, and of inventing, which we really haven't capitalized on effectively, right? We were one of the first 2 schools to do online learning in our field. People out there know that. They come to us, but we really haven't done much to promote that fact. You know, we're looking at Kent State a couple of years ago saying that they're the first entirely online program, and we're going, what? We've been doing that for 10 years. What are you thinking? So we need to get better at promoting ourselves. And we also have one of the very first IT undergraduate programs, right? And it's been through evolution and change over time, but that's something else where in terms of what an iSchool is and what an iSchool does, we have a history of innovation that we should carry forward. We were also, and Chuck can tell you about how much he loved this, we were also, when I arrived here, a very teaching-centric unit that has evolved over time to being more and more research-focused. And in part that was the reason that we got our EPS professor, was to help us start looking not only at research but funded research, and I think we've seen a cultural change there as well. There aren't too many traditional LIS schools who can say that they have the funded research profile that we have. Okay, so that's our direction. Okay, so I said I was going to talk a little bit about my leadership philosophy and particularly focus on certain terms. So the first was consistent, and the second was collaborative, and this is connected. One of the things that makes me think that I'm the right person for this moment is because I am connected. And it's something that really didn't come home to me until, what was it, about a month ago, Mafe, that we started making visits with alumni. And it dawned on me that I really do have a number of people out in the world who I know well who care about what we do. And a little bit before that, a year before that, I went to Korea, and I was just stunned, first of all, that I got to Korea at all, because I was going to Taiwan, and all of a sudden I had another week added to my trip, and our doctoral graduates, organized the whole thing and ferried me around and made me feel like Queen of the Week. But also because I didn't know that they cared that much about where they came from, that they were that interested in what was going on here, that they really wanted to have a role, an active and engaged role in moving us forward. Mafe and I found out the other day that two of our PhD graduates who live in this country, Korean, had not had an invitation since they left in 1998 to attend homecoming. And I thought, well, what a missed opportunity. Here are two people who really wanted to come and just didn't feel like there was enough of a connection to have them come. So I think that's one thing that I've learned, is that I am connected. I'm connected with our alumni. I'm connected with our faculty. I'm connected at this point, I think, with our staff. And I'm connected as much as anybody can be connected to the college and to the university. So what is that connection going to do? Well, it's going to help us to recruit. We know we have an enrollment issue. We can talk more about that later, what kinds of strategies and whether we want to go out chasing enrollments or not. But we can use that connection to recruit. And part of the reason that I think we can use that connection to recruit comes from my research. Some of you may remember that we had 2 IMLS grants here for Project Athena, which was a program to develop a model for recruitment of faculty so that we could have a diverse faculty pool. And Howard Rodriguez was one of the people who was recruited and did recruiting for us. That model was, in a sense, was an innovation, but it was based on what the research told us was the way that we get new students. We get new students by going out and having our alumni, having ourselves, having our ambassadors talk to people and engage with people. Now, we might be able to go out virtually as well as in person, but the basic idea here is that you recruit new students because they know alumni who say, hey, you really want to come to FSU, and you really want to work with so-and-so. Last year, when I was in Korea, I had the opportunity to meet with Kiduk Yang and Jungwook Lee, and I actually thought at first that this was a real mismatch, because Jungwook does citation analysis, and I was afraid that they were mistaking the fact that I was presenting some nice diagrams that came from citation data to them, that they thought that meant I did the analysis, which I did not. One of our graduates, Dongji Zhao, did the analysis. But what I learned in the process of talking with Jungwook was he already had those skills. He was looking for other kinds of skills. He was looking for other kinds of connections. And so he came, which I'm very happy about, because he's now doing good work, working with Micah Vandegrift and Gary and Jonghoon Beck on open access, collaborating with our colleagues in the library. I've talked a little bit about starting to work in development. This is an area that I totally resisted when I was an associate dean. I told Jane I would never do that. She'd just have to accept it. And but I've actually been enjoying our trips, and I think that we're building some connections, and that we will be able to re-engage some of our groups that we haven't really connected with for a while, and that will bring us both a nice community, collaborative community, and hopefully it'll also bring us some dollar signs and cents. And then invent. I've mentioned innovation several times already, but one of the things we haven't really, until I think Marcia brought it up recently, thought about was the extent to which we are inventors. And some of us invent products, some of us invent ideas. But when I went back and started looking at my own CV, I was stunned. I had 3 inventions. Not inventions and inventions, but I had 3 pieces of work that I had done that I wasn't ever going to get any credit for. As a faculty member, because of the way that our promotion and tenure process works, but we did get the President's Technology Award. And by the way, we didn't get this for 3 years because I refused to apply, because they insisted it would have to be my name. Then they told me it wouldn't be my name, that it would be the group, and then it was my name. And then we also, in the process of inventing that, which was one of the first course management systems to actually exist anywhere, we did research, collaborative research with a couple of doctoral students, and we got the Elise Methodology Paper Award. So we're inventors. Oh well. The problem with not having the clicker is I keep forgetting to change the slide. So here we are. This is Florida's iSchool. Now, what does all this mean to you all, and why should I be the one to move you forward? We face a lot of challenges. I think we can sort of roughly group our challenges into resources, respect, and reputation. Okay? And so, resources, first of all. We have issues with human resources, we have issues with technological resources, and we have issues with financial resources. In terms of human resources, we are still trying to sort out what happens, what goes where in the college. We have always had an issue in terms of low staff salaries that we've had to try to work with. And we have ourselves. And one of the issues with human resources is how are we going to replace ourselves? Or how are we going to bring new partners in to us when we know that our E&G budget, where all faculty lines must come from, is tied to legislative funding, tied to FTEs, and we don't necessarily have any way of influencing how higher education in Florida is funded, right? So we're going to have to be creative about those issues. Technological infrastructure is something that I think we continue to struggle with. I think that we really need to sit down and think for us as a school, where are we going with our technology? What technology do we need? If everything is moving to the cloud, and I'm not saying it is, but if everything is moving to the cloud, why have boxes in boxes, right? So we have to really be, I think, strategic, in part because we do have limited financial resources, but we also have to be innovative, and we have to do our research. So we have to start to think, where is it we want to go? What is it we want to do? That kind of thinking is easier to do in some ways if you are collaborative rather than individualistic, right? Right now we have something that addresses individual needs. We've got a 3-year rotation for computing for our individual, essentially word processing machines, right? But we don't have a rotation for our bigger, more collective needs. And not only do we not have a rotation, I'm not sure we absolutely know what we want, right? And part of that is just we live in a changing environment, and Google Glasses may be here in a couple of weeks, right? Part of it is that. Part of it is we don't know whether we want boxes on the ground or a vapor in the air. But we're going to have to make some educated guesses based on real solid research, and we're going to have to take some risks. Financial resources. I mentioned already that faculty have to be hired from the E&G budget, essentially. We can move pieces them all over the place, but that's how we get faculty lines, right? When I was associate dean, we had 3 budgets, really. We had our E&G budget, we had our auxiliary budget, and we had our foundation budget. And the E&G budget was actually pretty generous because we went from being 250 students to 2,000 students in no time flat. So we had lots of FTEs, and we were generating revenue. Never enough, but we were generating revenue. We had our auxiliary budget, which was an interesting, we were talking about this earlier, that the directors, the way that off-campus education is handled in the state of Florida is actually governed by rules and regulations that we have no control over. And so when we first started doing online learning, or well, pre-online and proto-online learning, we found that we had to go down and really knock at the door and beg and plead to get the funding that we were bringing in, okay? Because it all initially went to the Center for Professional Development, because that's the body that handles off-campus learning. Now, over time, we were able to negotiate that, and now one of our major revenue streams is that auxiliary funding. We also had, at that time, a very, 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 very tiny SRAD account. Our SRAD account's a little bit bigger right now. We do know that there are constraints to federal funding, there are constraints to state funding. Our sources are more limited than they were 5 years ago. We've made great strides in terms of getting out there and getting grants in lots of different areas from lots of different agencies, but we're facing challenges there. In any case, the budgeting now is much more complex. We also now have the market rate account. And that's an interesting innovation, pilot program. The provost says it's going to be okay. We'll see. But for the moment, it's a revenue stream for us and a pretty good one. But the problem is with all these budgets is that every one of them has constraints. And so, although Terry Weech said when he looked at our first draft of our program presentation, "What do you mean you're resource poor? You've got more money than Simmons does, and fewer students." But nonetheless, we have constraints, and so we have to be very careful and strategic about how we spend our money, and we have to develop an understanding for what's there, and which I think we made a good start on Friday among the financial planning group. The second thing that I think is a big challenge for us is respect. And it's respect because we've been through a lot of change. Whenever things change, you have to develop new trust and new respect. So that's part of it. It's partially that we're still working through the merger process, and so we're still trying to figure out who we report to, who we can talk to, when we have to go to the dean first, et cetera. And so it's not that it's good or bad, it's just different. We have a new situation in which we have to really work to get out there and build the trust and respect that we need. But we need that respect. We need that respect so we can do our day-to-day business, and we need that respect because it's at the core of our reputation. And I've already said a great deal about how we're an innovative faculty and how we've done really great things. We need to own those things. It just stunned me when I realized that I didn't think that online learning was an innovation anymore. It's like I forgot, I think that we really do have to pat ourselves on the back and tell other people about it. Right? We need to be promoting. We need to be out there offering our assistance to others who are, like Kent State, just getting entirely online, or Alabama that has a handful of courses they're trying to, that were really a library studies program, they're trying to turn into a master's program about IT. We can really have a big impact, not only on our reputation, but on the field as a whole, because we have so much expertise. And we've got the experience. So we just need to start owning what we do, promoting what we do, and then assessing what we do. Stepping back every once in a while and saying, okay, where are we? Where did we want to be? Is this the right thing to do at this time, or should we wait? How should we move things forward? So part of that is also a little bit about focus and direction, that we have to be focused and we have to have some direction. But I think the end of that process is really, we should do what we really do well already. We should use what we've already invented. We know how to do research. Every one of us knows how to do research. We have review processes in place, and they're pretty robust. Our 3-year cycle for curriculum review that we're doing in the master's program is working, right? So we can take that cycle, we can plug in new values and new objects and new goals, and we can come up with ways of reviewing other things that we do. And once we get that focused on program outcomes so that we really meet those external requirements that will help us build our reputation, I think we'll be in good shape that way. But we also have to every once in a while stand back and say, okay, where are we? What's next? And so that's part of that research review cycle. It's the end of that cycle. It's the part of the cycle that oftentimes gets left undone. You finish the review and say, okay, that's enough. All right. We talked about challenges. We also have some pretty amazing opportunities. And I think we really have done a lot of work to get those opportunities moving along. So what I want to do is invite you to imagine a future where consistency and where there is consistency and where we invest in collaboration, because I think that's what can ignite us so that we can connect people and information. I didn't say anything about the sources of all these images. They're all photographs that I've taken over the years. So a lot of them actually took place or came from North Florida, which is actually a very gorgeous and beautiful place, I've learned. But some of them took place or came from Washington or Scotland or wherever we were traveling at the time. And this image, in fact, is a word cloud mashup of all the words in our vision, mission, goals, and values. I didn't get as far as getting the objectives and the action plans because they're still typing those up in the office. But I think you can see something here. I mean, it's clear we're about information. That's obvious, right? That doesn't distinguish us from the other iSchools particularly, but it does distinguish us from other types of units. And it's also clear that we are committed and that we are interested in processes, that we're interested in people, and that we do things collaboratively. And I think that's an important message to take away. What I really want, though, is to make sure that you all understand that this comes from you, right? No other group could have made what we have right there. And I really, truly believe that we have all pulled together, worked together, and built something. And I hope we have the chance to keep it going. Thanks.
Watching online can hear you.
Questions or ideas?
Could you talk a little bit about some of your priorities that of things that you think might be really most important to concentrate on sooner than later,
Right.
were you to become director?
Yeah, I think I actually think after spending this last 6 months that the top priority at this stage really has to be building better relationships with our stakeholders. I think we really, that's going to be a long-term investment, but it's a worthwhile investment, and it'll give us more opportunities to do the other things that we are finding difficult right now to manage because we don't have the financial resources or because we don't have the human resources in place. So that's one big thing, I think, is we really have to build that respect in the university, and we have to build our reputation outside, and we have to do that through engaging to a much bigger extent than we have for a long time. Our alumni, our students, our employers, et cetera, right? So that's, that's a big priority. It's something that will evolve over time. Immediately, we need to take care of this front. We have a one-year report due to ALA in about 8 months, and I think that whole issue of getting our curriculum review cycle completed by integrating program outcomes into that cycle and making sure that we have outcomes that we can measure and that we think are meaningful. That's, honestly, I don't want to go through this exercise and have it turn out that we've chosen a bunch of outcomes that mean nothing to us, or an outcome like the one to decrease the enrollment in our graduate programs that still exists in the IEP. So I think it's going to be hard work, but that's actually a really important activity to undertake, and it will. We will be able. We have already begun through this process to be more inclusive of our stakeholders by actually surveying them and having them come and talk with us with the Masters Advisory Board, and then also bringing them to the table in our 2 recent retreats. So it's a process that will evolve. The other thing is, I honestly don't believe that we can. Okay, I'll just say it this way. I believe that the legislature will always give us some funding, and they will always give us some funding so that they can influence what we do, right? And that's as much funding that they will probably give us. That's not going to keep us alive. It's certainly not going to keep us vital, right? We really have to find other ways to fund ourselves, and we have to really go through and figure out how that's going to work in an environment where we do have legal constraints about where money can be spent and how money can be spent. So I think that's a big, big priority. And I think it needs to begin with the research that we started to plan for at the retreat. So the financial planning group has a plan. They expect to have all the data on their current budgets and the budgets for the last couple of years collected and massaged a little by the end of this year. And then we'll be moving forward so that hopefully by this time next year we can sit down and make some really good decisions about and informed decisions about how we move forward and how we spend. In the meantime, the way I think that we've designed the process, we will learn enough to make better decisions than we've been able to make in the past couple of years, because we'll have more information about what it is, and we'll be planning for where we want to go.
Yeah, let me do a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
I was quiet when I heard the...
He's doing a follow-up, please.
I remained quiet for the sake of us being able to get the hell out of Dodge last Friday. But and I really appreciate what you just said about getting finances organized and understood, et cetera. I will second what Kathy said, that between the time when I got here in 1999 and now, my dinky little budget at the Information Institute is ridiculous of trying to make sense out of all the accounts and so forth. So this is really a key issue. But what worried me a little bit, Kathy, was and I'll just blurt this out, I don't think we have this amount of time to get our finances understood in a plan and so forth. I was a little concerned at the timeline. I agree with all the... And so I'm wondering, why is this going to take so long?
Well, I don't think that it's... Okay, why is it going to take so long? Because it simply does take time, right? That's that. But we're not starting from zero. Okay, we're not starting from zero knowledge. Eve has a pretty good understanding of our budgets. I have, I think now, a pretty good understanding of our budgets. There are still some things that are mysterious to me, and that is probably because of issues related to the merger. And these, again, are not bad things. They're just, we are more complex than we used to be, right? We are. We have relationships with other schools. We have, we may have conflicting goals in terms of how we want to deploy resources. We may not all need the same things. For example, in technology, it's pretty clear that comm disorders has their own set of technological needs that none of the rest of us share. You know, they need to do sensors and probes and all kinds of things, and they need to exist under the umbrella of HIPAA, and so they've got very different needs than we do, although in some way our needs are closer to theirs than they are to communication, where they have, you know, where their goal is different. But I think we're about information, but we're about connections too, right? And so we are, at least at some important level, about technology. We have to use technology in a different way than you use just to do your word processing. And so I think that we can't really move forward until we know how we're going to use those things, right? And okay, so the situation is complicated because we've made some decisions, the college has made some decisions about how to deploy our resources, and we've been doing this for almost 4 years now, right? And some of those decisions have worked out well, and some haven't worked out as well, so we're going to have to reassess and you know, review, reassess, and figure out what does work well. I'm still not really very clear about whether our problems related to technology are related to people, they're related to hardware, they're related to software, or if they're related to just not knowing where it is we want to go, right? And I think those are issues that we're going to have to, whoever's comes into this position is just going to have to grapple with.
So I heard you just say that it's going to take more time than Chuck might want because we have bigger issues that have to be dealt with that affect how the financial plan will occur.
That's right. I think it's going to take more time than you would like because it's very complex, because things change all the time, and because if we're going to invest in doing this research, let's do it well, right? Let's make sure that at the end of it we do have a good understanding of where we are and a good plan for where we can go. Now that doesn't mean that that plan doesn't have to be flexible. It most certainly does, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be responsive to change. Obviously, we don't have a lot of control over most of our revenue streams, except how we spend them once we get them, and even there are serious constraints, right? So we just need to be much better informed so that we can invest in what we want to do and, you know, not buy boxes of pencils.
I have a question from Micah Vandegrift, who asks what you see the future relationship of SLIS with the university library libraries looking like.
You know, we've had an increasingly productive relationship with the university libraries. We have graduate assistants over there now. I have an email from Julia Zimmerman asking whether we would be interested in increasing the number of internships because they need more people who would be like our MSIT students with good technology skills. So we're working on that. The library and the Friends of the Library have agreed to co-sponsor our in two colloquiums, our colloquium with Bob Wedgeworth, because they're really interested in the relationships between libraries and iSchools, and so we're building that. I would say it's a strong relationship now, and it should only get stronger. You know, I'm not capable of thinking in black and white, so I don't think it's library or information. Frankly, it's both. You know, libraries are places where information is stored, where it's it's created, stored, disseminated. You know, it's exchanged, and that's what's key. And libraries will always, I'm sure, be an important component in what we do. And the better the relationship, I mean, when I first got here, the relationship with the libraries was horrible. It was awful. And it didn't get better really until Julia came, right? And so I think we're really lucky now, because I've been on several campuses, and Rutgers did not have a good relationship. Berkeley did not have a good relationship. I think we're just actually pretty fortunate right now in that regard. But we can do more to bring them in and involve them.
Other questions? Okay, well, let's thank Kathy again. And I just wanted to make a quick announcement. If you didn't get an evaluation form, there are some up here on the front table. And also, I am happy to accept those evaluation forms for the next couple of weeks. I would like to get them in by Monday, March 18th. But evaluation on this speaker as well as the previous speakers we've had. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
And if you can't get them to Don, bring them down to my Steve. I have a sealed hermetic jar in Buffalo Wagner.